Okay, welcome to this session on biometrics. I'm Steve Spearman. I'm the founder, lead instructor, and headmaster for CyberCert Academy. I'm glad you could join us today. Let me get this to full screen here and got to reverse that. Okay, great. Welcome. So you probably all heard what biometrics is. We're going to learn some of the specific terms, ideas that are contained in the CISSP so you can tease your way through those biometrics related questions. So what is it? It is a type 3 authentication factors. Just as a reminder, type 1, something you know, type 2, something you have, and type 3 is something you are. So that it is a specific reference to biometrics, biometric authentication. We're not going to go into what authentication is, all that. That'll be, it's covered elsewhere. But it's about proving the identity of a claimant. You say you're Steve Spearman. Well, let's make sure you're Steve Spearman. So, the way type 3 authentication factors, in other words, biometrics work, it uses a unique physical trait to identify an individual and authenticate. There are a number of different processes, steps, etc., that are associated with biometrics. One is enrollment. That's the process of having the system capture a uh, uh, unique attribute, physical attribute. It's interesting. There are some biometric techniques that are not dependent on physical attributes, but on behavioral attributes, such as keyboard dynamics, things like that. But most of the time, we associate biometrics with a physical attribute. The process of enrollment is capturing that physical attribute and holding it in a profile. And one of the things that you have to consider when you're thinking about implementing a biometric system is the time and difficulty of enrollment. So that profile information is held in either a database or in a common access card or some other place. And then then the actual use of it involves verifying a live capture sample of that attribute and comparing it with the profile data. So you not only have to think about difficulty of enrolling data, but the difficulty of verifying the data and other factors that come out of that, which we'll be talking about now. So another factor that should be considered when you're thinking about biometrics is social acceptability. I find it interesting and fascinating that the most common, the fastest growing type of biometric that's out there is Face ID, which is also probably the most socially problematic in some ways. Fear of, Big Brother, those fears are not unwarranted. But here we are. It is the fastest growing area, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in just a bit. So, okay, you need to consider that as well. So, when it comes to biometric, there are two types of matching. There's what's known as one-to-one matching and one-to-N matching. These can, for some reasons, I've had some people in my boot camps that struggle to understand this. So, I'm going to try to make this as clear as possible. With one-to-one matching, the system captures a live capture sample and then it compares it against a known profile, right? Let's say the procedure involves you going in and you take your CAC and you scan it in. And as a part of that, the system draws out the biometric profile out of your CAC. Okay. You're already telling the system who you are. It knows who you are. So with one-to-one matching, it's authentication only. It's not doing any identification, right? You're already, claiming who you are, and now the authentication is just verifying that that the claim is true. It already knows who you are. And one of the things to think about in the CISSP is that you get a question, might even be kind of complex. So just ask yourself this question. Did the system already know who the person was? If they already knew who the person is claiming to be, at least, then it's one-to-one matching. It's matching a live capture sample with a known profile. Okay. One-to-one matching is very quick. It happens almost instantaneous when it occurs. Okay. When you are authenticating into your laptop using a fingerprint reader, it's one-to-one matching. Your phone, one-to-one matching. You hold up your phone, your Face ID, it's one-to-one matching. It knows who you are. It's not trying to figure out who you are. And that's what one-to-N matching is. One-to-N matching both identifies and authenticates. So, give you a great example of one-to-N matching. Fingerprint at a crime scene. Hey, do we know who the perpetrator was? I don't know, but we got a good full thumbprint. And they're going to pass that thumbprint through a database of thumbprints and they're going to try to identify you. It's identification and authentication. You're compared against a whole system or database of known entities to match with one, to find the match. Okay. One-to-N matching. The system does not know who you are prior to you stepping up and giving your live capture sample. So see this in a lot of places today. So for example, Clear at the airport uses one-to-N matching. You haven't told that system, you may have told a person, you may have even shown them something, but the system doesn't know who you are. And it takes your iris or face or whatever it is that Clear, is using. It actually varies from location to location, and it's actually finding you against a known database of Clear customers, right? Global entry, another example. Global entry, if for any of you that travel internationally, I got to tell you, global entries is the same thing, like the greatest thing since sliced bread and Velcro and a host of other things. It feels like cheating when you use global entry. You go up to the workstation, you stand about 5 feet away, it uses Face ID, and it identifies you. You haven't told the system who you are. And so of course you're in the database of global entry, occupants. There's currently about a 6 to 9 month wait to get an appointment for global entry. And I'm going to tell you a secret hack. If you're traveling internationally and you don't have global entry, on your way back, plan your travel so that it's during the day, reasonable business hours. And you can often get your appointment on the fly. You can often go to the office and say, hey, I'd like to go ahead and do the interview, and they will accommodate you. I've had multiple people tell me that they were able to go from the 9 month wait list to be able to get in, just by going to the global entry office. So global entry is amazing. It's another example of one-to-N matching, doesn't know who you are, and it's comparing you against a database. There's even at some airports, there's what they call digital identity. It's often in a line that's right next to Clear, but this is true in Atlanta. And if you go get signed up for it, it's really easy to do. And it uses Face ID and one-to-N matching, and it's about as quick as Clear is, to be honest. So it is identifying and then authenticating. And that's what you need to remember if you're breaking down a question. Ask yourself, did the question, did the system already know who you were? And if it knew who you are, then it's one-to-one matching. If it doesn't know and it's like a crime scene, that's one-to-N matching. There are also two types of errors that are associated with biometrics. One is called a type 1. It's a false rejection. That means you're an authorized user and you give them your thumbprint and said, nah, we don't recognize you. Give them your thumbprint. Nah, we don't recognize thumbprint. No, we don't not recognize you. Eventually, what's known as the clipping level kicks it in, and they're not going to let you keep trying. So it's basically rejecting an authorized individual. I have several family members that with the fingerprint reader on the iPhone, it never worked right. It was constantly giving false rejection. Don't know you, don't know you, don't know you. Okay. So if it rejects a person who's authorized, that's known as a false rejection. When when that false rejection is compared against all attempts by all people, that's known as the false rejection rate. So the numerator is the number of false rejections versus the denominator, which is total attempts. And it's recognized as a percentage, usually way less than 1% if it's a uh, well implemented system. Okay, type 2 error is a false acceptance. It's when the system accepts an imposter. So actually, one of the things you hear also with iPhone, and you don't hear it as much as you used to, when the iPhone Face ID first came out, it was like, you heard so many stories about, yeah, my brother, my sister, my daughter, my son can get into my phone. And I still hear those stories where somebody says, yeah, I had somebody say, yeah, my sister can get in your phone. I said, like, have you tried re-enrolling, like deleting the profile and running? Yeah, she said several times it never works. She said, and the worst thing about it is that I can't get in her phone. So I was like, I don't know what to tell you. That's a false acceptance. That's accepting an imposter. The false acceptance rate, just like false rejection, is the how often that happens. The numerator is the number of false acceptance, accepting an imposter versus the total number of attempts, the denominator. Now, when you're considering a type 1 and a type 2 error, remember that in information security, what we care about the most is false acceptances. The point is to lower the false acceptance rate to an acceptable level. And in many environments, the false acceptance rate is 0. We can't have any false acceptances. But because of the way this works, that means you're going to have more false rejections, right? This is a graph that shows how the false acceptance and false rejections work. If you have it's managed by managing the sensitivity of the biometric reader, right? If you set the biometric reader to be more sensitive, you are going to increase the number of false rejections and decrease the number of false acceptances. And there is a setting related to sensitivity known as the crossover error rate. That means you're adjusting, and I actually like to say it's like, imagine you're adjusting. It's actually referred to in biometric as tuning, right? You have a big button on the side of that, and you turn it this way, and that means it makes it more sensitive. And you turn it this way, it makes it less sensitive. And you turn it this way, make it more sensitive. What does that do to the false rejection rate? Remember, it's a trade-off between one or the other. If you turn it this way, make it more sensitive, it increases the false acceptances. It's going to move you from here to somewhere along here. If you move it this way, you make it less sensitive, then you're going to end up moving down, and making it more likely that you're going to have false acceptances, but you're not going to inconvenience your authorized users, right? So it works on a continuum. The more sensitive it is, the more false rejections you have, and the less sensitive it is, the more false acceptances. Now, what does it really mean? Like, what is the significance of the crossover error rate? Well, first of all, it is not a goal to program your system to the crossover error rate. It is not a goal. Because remember, in information security, we want to reduce false acceptances. We want, and here's how I like to put it. Depending on where you are, where you work, you're going to probably be somewhere here on this graph. You might be here where the number of false acceptances is 0, which means you're going to have more false rejections, right? Or maybe you're somewhere here. Maybe it's a healthcare environment where it's, good, but it's not like crucial that there's no top secret information that you have to protect. But you're probably not going to be up here. You're probably not going to be, here somewhere, like where you're going to manage to the false acceptances. So why do we care about the crossover error rate? We're not trying to get it to tune it to the crossover error rate. And here's why we use a crossover error rate. It is a measure of the biometric system's accuracy. There is one crossover error rate that if you could get it, you would totally be happy with that. And that is with the crossover error rate being 0, empty set. No false acceptances, no false rejections. In other words, the perfect system. So there's no such thing as a perfect system. But what biometrics vendors are trying to do is get their technology as close to 0 as possible. And that's the real value of the crossover error rate. The biometric vendors will publish their crossover error rate, and usually they will be independently verified by third parties. Depends on the setting and things like that, but they might have gone through a common criteria 15408 with government entities and all that to independently verify what they're claiming. So the crossover error rate is an indication of accuracy. The lower, the better. Okay. Now, last thing I want to talk about is the different types of biometric, and kind of a little bit about pros and cons and things like that. Fingerprints been around forever. There's a huge data set related to accuracy of fingerprints. By the way, I'm just generally always amused at how often or the ways that biometrics is used in like movies. It's just hilarious. It's so if you have seen the latest what is the name of the guy? The giant guy on Amazon, forgotten his name. Anyway, at the end of the last second season, they have this guy has a finger and an eyeball in a jar so they could get onto his system. Doesn't work that way, folks. It's hilarious. Minority Report. Minority Report, Tom Cruise takes an eyeball in a baggie and he uses it later to get into the police department. You guys, retina scans, they depend on like intact veins in the back of that's what it is. It's retina. So anyway, um, fingerprints have been around for a long time. It's very tried and true technology. It's relatively inexpensive, but you can actually you can actually copy a fingerprint. You can use things like baby powder and super glue, cyanoacrylate, and you can peel it off. And even though your fingerprint will be reversed, biometric scanners don't know that. They're not looking for the direction of the pattern, the orientation of the scan. It's looking for the number of whorls and that's spelled WHORLS, whorls and curves and things like that. And so you can actually, you can copy a fingerprint. Face scan, very fast growing, physical access, especially. More actually, when I went around, about a year ago, and I was sort of researching the crossover error rate for different technologies, face scans are surprisingly accurate. And the reason I expected it to be lower was because you hear these stories about iPhone. But iPhone doesn't have to be as accurate as Global Entry does. The reason is because it's one-to-one matching, right? There's only one profile it can possibly match against. So the fact that, occasionally someone's sister might be able to isn't usually a factor that's a, big concern. But face scans, fast growing, it's used in a lot of physical access, and I gave examples earlier. Retina scans. Retina scans are very accurate, and they're relatively inexpensive. Kind of inconvenient though. You have to get really close to that reader. But due to privacy concerns, they're actually on their way out. Like your retina can tell you about things like pregnancy, glaucoma, blood pressure. It actually contains health information. And so the concern about retina scans is that that data could be potentially compromised, and then, so due to privacy concerns, it's actually kind of being phased out. Iris scans are accurate and inexpensive it's an accurate, inexpensive method. However, accurate and inexpensive, but you can emulate an iris through high resolution photographs. So what does that mean? Iris scans really only make sense in an attended environment. That's sort of true for fingerprints too, unless it's a fingerprint reader with one-to-one matching. So, our scans presumably maybe not with one-to-one, but if it's one-to-many, you definitely needs to be attended. So, palm scans, which are basically vein patterns, it's a reasonably inexpensive, accessible, and accurate method. It's what ISC2 uses at Pearson VUE. So, I say ISC2 because Pearson VUE has different standards for different organizations, and ISC2 requires palm scan. It's actually not, it's a palm print, but it's really a scan because it's not the print. It's not, it's actually the vein patterns. And the way the palm scanner works is it goes over a box and there's nothing actually touching your palm. Voice print, you're seeing, I actually have a bank that uses voice print to authenticate. It is never used by itself, as an authentication method. It's a secondary authentication. It's, we're not far away from being able to mimic anybody's voice. So there's also biometric behaviors like gait, keyboard dynamics. That means it's not just that you enter in the right password, but how you enter it in is going to be different from someone else. Same thing with signature dynamics. It's not easy necessarily to copy someone's signature, but it's possible. We call those people forgers, but forgers are like this. Low. Whereas when you sign it, and that's what we mean by signature dynamics. So, okay, thank you for this little mini presentation on biometrics. I hope it was helpful. You have a great day.